So let's get started. We're a few minutes after the hour. We've got about 40 or 50 people who RSVP'd, but I want to honor all of you who showed up on time and all that good stuff. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Diane Darling, and I am a speaker and do workshops around networking. And I am a good networker, which is why I met Andreas, was that 15 years ago at least?
At least.
At
Yes.
least
Yeah.
at a conference, and I have stayed in touch with him. And so that is a magic thing to do, to stay in touch with people and continue to follow his story. When I heard him speak back then, I was just so impressed with his story about being a guard, a Swiss guard. And so for the Pope, it was Pope John Paul II that he guarded. And so I want to be sure that we have a chance to, get some questions and answers about that experience about being a guard, and then also about the experience, about just some of the career lessons you learned from that job. And obviously, we are in a historical situation at the moment, having the first American Pope in history.
No kidding.
I know, no kidding, absolutely. And I think I was at an event here, Andreas, with Boston College, which, as you know, is a I think it's a Jesuit school.
Yeah, it is.
And,
Yep.
yeah, and they announced that there was white smoke, and everybody was picking up their phones real fast. And of course, it hadn't been announced who the Pope was, but we just knew that there was a new Pope.
Yeah.
And I think by that afternoon, people were pretty gobsmacked, which I love that British word, with the story. So I'm going to start out with a few questions. Um, so how does one interview for for
Yeah.
that job? I mean, I believe, if I remember correctly, you really are the guard. You're taught to. Are you
Yeah,
like Secret Service for the Pope?
yeah, that's right. So, hi everybody. I'm very honored to be here. I want to say I consider myself Bostonian. Diane and I met each other in Boston, and I live in DC now because I teach at Catholic University, but I've lived in Boston for 25 years. We got married in Andover. We lived in Somerville, Charlestown, the whole thing. And all my companies were in Boston. So I was in the software industry for many years and helped grow and build a few really great software companies. And I'm greatly indebted to Boston for that. When we started, Diane and I told her that I still think Boston is the center of the universe, as far as I'm concerned. And and that'll remain that way. But yes, so it's fun. I love talking about the guards and everything, but it's something I did at the beginning of my life. It changed my life dramatically, but it is something that it comes from the early part in my life. I joined the Swiss Guards when I was 20 years old, and I left when I was 23, which is normal. It's the normal size. In order to be in the guards, they're called Swiss Guards for a reason. You have to be Swiss. We're the oldest military corps that still exists in the world. We were founded in 1506, and they're exclusively made up of Swiss because they were always very good mercenaries and fighters. There's a long history of that. Many people don't know that every king in Europe was always protected by a corps of Swiss mercenaries. And so it's true for the Pope, who, in a sense, is an absolute monarch. They had their own state. The church had its own state, the papal states in the middle of Italy before the revolution. And we were not the military of that state. We were always the personal protection, which is what in the United States, what you would call the Secret Service that protects the president. In order to get in, you said about how do you interview. So Switzerland is a mandatory military service. Every male has to go, not just has to go, but you get tracked from 12 years on in your performance, physical, and so on. And then you get put in a track for the military. And I grew up in a small village out in the canton of Lucerne, like in the mountains. But I very much excelled at that, at the military side of things. I'm 6'9". I have 4 older brothers. I know how to fight. So they like that. And the military liked it. And because it's the military is also public information, And so the Swiss Guards are not affiliated with the Swiss military or the Swiss government, because the Swiss Guards are, of course, Catholic. You know, a lot of the Protestant, a lot of the reformers were Swiss. You know, Calvin, Zwingli, and so on. These are Swiss uh, reformers, and they made Switzerland as a whole into a Protestant country, and therefore there's no connection between Switzerland and the Vatican per se. But we are allowed, as the Catholic minority in Switzerland is allowed to still do that service, which is a legionary service, meaning a foreign legion, except that we have to give up our passport when we enter the Swiss Guards, and then the agreement is that you get the passport back after you leave the Swiss Guards, and you won't be prosecuted, because, you know, if as an American you would go and suddenly serve in a different military or for a different head of state, that's treason. You would go to jail for that.
So you essentially give up your Swiss citizenship while you're a guard.
Yes, yeah, you
Got it.
become a Vatican citizen, and so the way this works to enter, so you you have to have the idea as a young man. You can say, well, I would like to apply for that, and so you have to go find them. And now it's, of course, more modern, but in my time, I heard it through a friend of mine who said that he just did the coolest thing ever, that he's actually a bodyguard and so on. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do with my life. I'm like, I'll do that. You know, as long as they would give me a gun and train me, and that I have the bug in the ear and everything. I thought that was about as cool as it gets. And then only then afterwards, I found out that I had to protect the Pope. And I'm like, you know, I wasn't very religious or so, but, you know, we went to church. I mean, my dad made me go to church, and I was baptized, confirmed, you know, first communion. But I would say I was more like a cultural Catholic, because it was not my faith, it was my parents' faith, right? And so I'm like, but I have nothing against it, but I just didn't know anything or not much about it, or wasn't really interested in it. And but that is not a condition. So they're not going to do a test of how religious are you. They say you have to be Catholic. Which being Catholic means you're baptized, first communion, and confirmed. Then you're Catholic, and that's the only thing they check. But beyond that, then you had to go and there is, Diane, there is this talk that you have with somebody. You meet the commander of the guards, and they check you like you would in the Secret Service, but physical and all that stuff. But that's very well documented because of the military. But an extensive background check. So if anybody in my field would have had any issues with police or anything like that, even my siblings, not just me, but even around me, they would not. It's because they just need you to be squeaky clean on that. And then you had to meet the commander and sort of do an interview. Where there he was more looking at the personality that you have. And then one day I got a letter, and they said, "Oh, show up in Rome on this and this date." I think it was November 1st, 1986. And then I flew there, and it's like what probably happens in the French Foreign Legion. You fly there and you get into the barracks, and they close the doors behind you, and that's when you give your passport, and they don't give you another passport right then. And then it's like, you signed your life away for 2 years at least. And I'm like, oh boy. And then the adventure began.
So I do have to ask a question about the uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
Are they as comfortable and fun to wear as they look, or?
So the uniform is called a gala uniform, and you only wear it in certain places, and mostly only young soldiers wear those. The actual work is done like the Secret Service in black suit and tie.
The black suit, and nobody. So when you see the people with the Pope mobile, those
are the guards.
Those are the guards as well. And the people who are in the kind of Cirque du Soleil kind of
Exactly,
fun
exactly.
uniforms. So they're
Yeah,
all kind of they're both the guards. They're all the guards.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
old gala uniform is a reminder of the beginnings of the Swiss mercenary corps, which means, it's like the Swiss often had to fight each other in these mercenary corps. Uh, and so what they did in order, it's almost like flag football, or is it flag football called, where you gotta know who's on which team. And so what they do is these tassels that they wear, these uniforms will be in the colors of the king that you're fighting for, and so that you would know which team they belong to when they fight each other, right? And so that was kept and reintroduced in the Swiss Guards actually at the turn of the last century with this historic uniform, which is actually only 125 years old. But the commander back then did the research, and they would have these tassels in the color of the person they serve, in the king they serve. And then when the king dies or they change allegiance, then they rip them off and put the new colors on, right? And so the colors that you see in the Swiss Guard uniform are for the Medici family, because they not only were there several popes who came from the Medici family, but our greatest claim to fame is when we defended the Pope, Pope Clement, I think it was the eighth, I'm not sure, in 1521, in the sack of Rome against the united forces of King Charles and Spain and Germany, anyway. And they sacked Rome, and they wanted to kill the Pope and basically do away with Catholicism. And the Swiss were there were only about 450 of us, but thousands of these other soldiers. And our strategy was to just save his life, like to just get him into security. And on that day, May 6th, 1521, they said the guards, they sacrificed themselves in different stations to hold up the enemy, but they saved the Pope's life. And since then, when you become a guard, there's all kinds of honorific titles and things like that, but you can officially call yourself the Latin as a defender of the faith is one of the things that you get. As it's a military order, right? And
Yep.
so there's, of course, just like in the US military, there's this sort of an inside baseball kind of thing that they talk about. And so that's why we do our swearing in ceremony of the new recruits every May 6th. That was just now, but we didn't have it because the Pope died, and we needed a new Pope first.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's what the uniform is. And there are also other uniforms. There's a blue uniform, and there's also a sort of a what do you call it? Like an entertainment uniform, like a dinner uniform and things like that.
Yeah.
But the one that everybody knows is the one that is made in the Medici colors.
Got it. Okay. One story you shared that I absolutely loved when I first met you was the story about when you let the Pope out for Christmas.
Yeah.
And I still think you need to write a book called "Who Let the Pope Out." But
Yeah, I should definitely do that.
yeah, who
Yeah,
let
it's
the
funny
Pope
that
out? Boop 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 boop.
they,
But it was just such a thoughtful story about you calling your mom, and
yeah,
and then you were between, you were the person between the Pope and letting him out to do midnight mass.
exactly. That it's the same with any person that's protected at that level, that they think they're not locked in, but they're of course always locked in. We just know where they are, and whatever door they try is open because you wouldn't leave the door. I mean, you can't just walk into the White House and the doors are open. No, but the president doesn't ever have to turn the key. Well, the same in the Vatican. One of the things that is endearing about this story is, of course, it's a very simple thing that I was very sad and I cried because I didn't think he was going to come out my door. And I was 20 years old. It was Christmas Eve. I never left home before. And as I said, I was thinking I made a big mistake being there. And I sort of, was just in a bad space. and he and I, they told me let him out because he's going to celebrate mass or whatever, and so I just turned the key, and then eventually he opened the door and he comes out and he sees me and he notices that I cried, and it was just him and I, and he basically came over and said, look, and he asked me the name and everything, and he knew. He says, I've never seen you before, and I'm like, well, I'm new, and he sort of embraced me and said, look, I'm so happy that you're here and we're going to work together. It's all going to be good. And that's when he said, look, I'm going to pray for you now. And instead of telling me to do something, he basically said, look, I know how you can feel, and I look forward to working with you and getting to know you. And in the meantime, I'm going to pray for you now. And to me, this was sort of a pivotal point in my life. Because the interesting thing is, of course, when you work with somebody, when you're somebody's bodyguard, they're your boss, right? He was more my boss than my pope, because if you're not really you're not into it, then I didn't know what the significance of a pope was. I just knew that he was the person I had to protect, and therefore you have to you get to know the person in a different way, right? And it's not like, also people sometimes say, well, so you were like his best friend. No, I wasn't his best friend. I wasn't even allowed to talk to him unless he talked to me. There's a protocol for this. You don't have the Secret Service guy talk to the president. But if the president talks to you, and we do the same, if he talks to me, I can talk back. I will never start a conversation. But he did often talk, and he remembered my life. And one of the beautiful things is that it's a personal relationship. And he invites, if you're in the Guards, he invites your parents to say thank you to them about your service. And I'm telling you, that was one of the most
Wow.
beautiful moments in my life. You know what's funny? It's, we all have this coming of age feeling with our parents. I mean, now my mom is still alive. My dad passed away, God rest his soul. But you know how now at our age, we're starting to take care of our parents? And so ultimately that's when it switches, right? Where they're the kid again, right? And you have to say, well, what did you eat yet today? Or did you take the medicine and so on? To me, this happened the first time I had that feeling is actually when the Pope invited my parents and all the other recruits' parents, but you had a private audience. So I walked up to the Pope with my parents on my side. And as I'm walking up, both parents held my hand. And it's the first time where they held my hand. When somebody holds your hand, if you're holding their hand or they're holding your hand. It's just something on a human level. It's the first time they both held my hand, and I was the one. And then I was able to introduce them to the Holy Father, and that was just. And then he's like, "Oh, Andreas," and he's like, "Oh, he's my tallest guard," and he goes to my dad. I know where he got it from, and then he goes to my mom, and I see where he got his kindness from, and my mom was just crying, and it was just he was that, he was that personable and personal, and there it changed my life. Changed my life. I don't want to go too much. This is not a
No. So this is
it, but
amazing. So I do want a couple more questions, and then I definitely want anybody to please put your questions in the chat. Victoria will track them, and I would hope that you all participate as well. So let's go to the Pope side of things. Were you guarding when the Pope was shot? No.
No, that was 5 years before me.
Okay. And how did guarding the Pope change after that?
Yeah, much. My sergeant is the guy who caught Ali Akça on the square. And you know that he always refused, we called him the Christmas tree because, in the military, he had all the medals, but he only took the ones like the official ones from the Vatican, but he tried to refuse the medals because he said, I didn't catch Ali Akça, I saved his life. Because the idiot shot the Pope in the middle of a bunch of nuns. And by the time that Giovanni showed up, Ali was on the floor. And, people were like getting at him.
Right.
And so he jumped in and grabbed him and then arrested him. And
he did save his life because somebody else would have killed him.
And he says, like, these nuns are the ones who need the medal, not me, because they're the ones who caught him. He wouldn't have got left, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, but he was, he's a great. It was actually just his birthday yesterday or before yesterday, and but he's one of the great legends, Giovanni, in the Swiss Guards, because he's the guy who brought in Ali Akça, and things changed a lot. But it's always a backward and forward. It's difficult to give the Pope the kind of security that you would want if you want to make somebody totally secure. But and just don't get this the wrong way, but total security is not the objective. The objective is for the Pope to do his ministry, to make that as safe as possible.
Yeah.
You can't go on that square with 50,000 people on it and make that safe. That's just not going to be safe. You can't have him walk in and talk with people and make that safe. That's just not going to happen. And so our objective is to make it as safe as possible. And so we adapted a lot of things. You'd be surprised there's sort of layers of security around somebody like that. And you're surprised how much it relies on the physical interaction. That at the end of the day, when you're very close with somebody, at the end, your best weapon and your best protection is your body protecting the other person. And that's the whole time you're there and the whole time before. That's the key training you get.
Yeah. With this election of the new Pope and all of that, I have my humble feeling is that yes, there's prayer involved with picking who this person is. However, this person has to be somebody who can do the job. And so to that extent, he's the CEO of one of the largest institutions in the world. So what are some of the skills or traits that you've seen among the popes and their ability? Obviously, they have to be good at public speaking. They, how many languages do you speak, by the way?
Well, it depends what you call speak, but 4 or 5.
Yeah,
that's not a big deal where I come from.
It's not a big deal in Switzerland now.
Yeah.
So the same in one person put in the chat. Were your conversations with the Pope in Italian?
Yeah, in the beginning they were in High German,
Okay.
And like that first time it was in High German, and then eventually you learn Italian there very quickly, and I had to go to school for Italian during that time, and so the language in the Vatican for everybody is Italian.
Italian, yeah.
Now, to your question, let me clarify something. So the teaching about the papacy and the continuation of the papacy, the church isn't saying, well, this is not a miracle club, okay? We don't believe in sorcery or something. It's not like the Holy Ghost is coming down and saying, this guy, right? Thomas Aquinas says grace built on nature. The Pope gets chosen because of many reasons, including political reasons, including what he can do and who likes him and who doesn't like him. And this is a human choice. But grace built on nature, meaning out of that human choice, God can actually bring good. It's a little bit like the best way to think about how God works with us humans. We're not marionettes where God goes, this is how this is how I want you. And you're not supposed to guess, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And then God, no, that's not the one, or this is. No, the way this works is a bit like this, that you say, Tolkien had an explanation of this. We're like an orchestra, and God is kind of the recording artist and the composer, and we play, and often we play atonal music, and like we dance, we play out of the range, and we don't play the piece right because I don't want to, or this and that. And then instead of reprimanding you in this sense, the way this works, that's this idea of grace built on nature. Immediately when you're doing your piece and you're playing your wrong tones, in a sense, God will immediately recompose the entire piece until it makes sense again with your false tone in it. And then looking back, you're saying, well, this tone is perfect. Well, it wasn't perfect when you did it, but there is a way in history that this becomes right. You see, and that's the interaction of grace and nature, that we are not puppets. This is not somebody, this is not, the way that faith and grace works isn't magical. It's actually a symbiosis, and it involves human freedom and uh, and in a sense the history of the world. So the Pope, in a way, then is often becoming the right Pope rather than being the right Pope right away. And that's so true in our own lives, that our choices over time can become the right choices. They are sometimes not the right choices right away. That's it's important to understand that, because often people think it's also the concept of holiness. People say, "Well, I worked with a saint." Yeah, um, there's many saints on the phone on this call here. Sainthood means you're fully human. Sainthood means to be fully living up to what God, how God created you. And when we think about heaven and to life after death, and we want to fully shine there, then that's holiness. And so therefore everybody's called to this, and many of your parents and your siblings and people, your friends and spouses and everybody who died are probably saints because they went to heaven. So that's, now the church just declares a few people that, but in a sense the assumption is that everybody who dies is going to be, is meant to be a saint, right? And so it's not like John Paul was like making no noise when he walked, or never got angry or pissed off at something, because he did. I was there, and he would have drinks with us, like beer with us, and jokes, and fully alive. That is sainthood. Fully alive, fully human, and in a sense loving, and the proper way of love there is, and that is something he did a lot, is the love of wanting the good of the other. He explained to me once that love in many languages is such a strange word, because it's one word for many things. Like I love my dog, I love pretzels, I love my wife. Well, those are three different kinds of love.
Yeah.
And do I love my employees? So he would say, I love you, in a sense, my employees. And he says, how can we say that in a way that you understand what I mean? And he says, Italian is a good language for this, because in Italian, you don't say, in Italian, ti amo means I love you. But you wouldn't use that to, like, you and I, Diane, we're friends. We've known each other for many years. And yes, in a way, we could say in English, I love you. But it could be weird. And so what he explained is that in Italian, instead of saying ti amo, you say ti voglio bene. Ti voglio bene. I want your good. This is literally what they say. Ti voglio bene. And so now I look at Diana and say, Diana, I want your good. Isn't that beautiful? That's the essence of friendship. To say, Diane, I want your good, meaning I will not do anything or say anything that isn't to your good. Not my good, your good. This is this other directedness that he did, and he wanted my good. And he achieved it because he contributed to it. Why would you do so? And the question then is, okay, what good do you want from me? What do you wish on me? So I say, I wish you well. Well, what's the well you wish for me? This is where we become, and what he taught me is where we become agents, and where freedom is involved. So I'm a believer. I'm a faithful. I'm a practicing Catholic. I do not expect all of you to agree with that, or to even have the same faith, or proclaim Christ as the Lord. Fine. But what I wish on you is to go to heaven. Now, this doesn't require your belief, it requires my belief. And this is what the leaven is that he asks us to be, and me to be, in society, to say, go out there and wish good on others. And so then I will not do anything with you that would violate that wish of mine, to say, why would I do something? Why would I sell you a product? Why would I say something to you? Why would I put you in a temptation that will lead you away from that fullness of you? You see what I mean? I wouldn't do that. Do you see how this becomes, this is like a fire. If this catches, then each one is looking for the other's good. And this is, in a way, what I teach today in the business school, is to say, how do we create companies like that? where we want the good of the other. They say, well, leave your religion at home. No, I'm not leaving my religion at home, but I'm going to practice it that way. That I'm not making you do anything, but I will live my religion by wanting ti voglio bene. I want your good, and your good is to live forever in happiness. And I will do anything I can to enable that, not to force you, but to enable it. From it won't be. I'm not putting a stone in your way. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to help. And I think in that way, this is a different way to look at how we live together in a way, in a tolerant society, not just tolerant, but in an enabling society that we actually help each other. You see what I mean? And that's something he
Absolutely.
taught me.
So the Pope is the CEO of this company, and his kind of role is to empower his people to do their
Yeah,
best good.
yeah, yeah.
I
And
met one time Pat, what was his last name? Anyhow, he was the CEO of IDG, and he said CEO is Chief Enthusiasm Officer.
that's a good one.
Isn't that a good one?
Yep. And he
I thought that was a
was
good. Yeah,
he was the enthusiasm officer,
yeah.
mostly
So
mostly in a good mood and always up for a joke. So like I don't
yeah,
know, Polish. I experienced Polish people as very cerebral, like they really care about academics,
yeah.
but not too full of themselves. Like always open to a joke or a little
Okay,
sarcasm. So,
okay.
yeah,
So the new Pope is an American. How surprised were you at that?
absolutely surprised. Um, his name came up the first time I heard. I always, they always say the Pope and the Empire have two different two different countries, right? And back in Europe, in the European days, but now, why would the most powerful country also supply the Pope? But when you really think about it, it shouldn't be about that. Um, they need a person who can lead the church in a credible and productive way, and they selected this Robert Prevost. Before the conclave, there are these meetings of the cardinals, and it's also there's prescribed who talks to them. They have to all sit there and then listen to a few people that are prescribed. They have to listen to each other, but it's prescribed that certain people come in. And so there's like uh, a woman superior, a brother superior, a lay person, somebody from government. But there's a whole list of people, and one of them is the chief financial officer of the Vatican. Now you have to understand that there's two things in the church. There is the Pope had a state before the Italian Revolution, and in a sense that just got smaller, and now that state is called the Vatican. But the Pope itself, but there was a papacy before the Pope had a state, right? Because the Pope is really a religious leader, not a government leader. But the two were put together when there was a vacuum, and after the Roman Empire, and the Pope created a state just to create this security or stability for the population, and then fell into this whole thing with being a king and everything, which probably wasn't a good idea. But anyway, now you still have those two things, and you need to keep the two things separately. The Pope has a state, and it's called the Vatican, but the Pope has a church, and it's called the Catholic Church. The official name is the Vatican is called Vatican City State, and the church in an international way is called the Holy See, right? The See meaning a seat, and the Holy See and the Vatican is not the same thing. The accreditation of the international recognition of the Vatican of the Pope as a head of state is actually not to the Vatican but to the Holy See. So there's two organizations inside the Vatican: the Holy See, which is the Catholic Church, and then the Vatican State, which physically is around it, which has museums and all of that. So there's a government in the Vatican, and there's the church in the Vatican. The two things together, and the Pope is a kind of the head of both. But for the government, there's a governor, and the whole, and there's police, there is a health system, there's everything, the gasoline, fire police, the whole thing, like just like a state. And that state is in big trouble because that's where you hear these issues of how much does it cost to have that state? They're bleeding money. They're making investments that don't always work out. There's some people who are not honest with it. There's some level of corruption. There's also just incompetence, as always in some bureaucracies, and they're bleeding money. Just before Francis died, like maybe 4 months or so before Francis died, Francis announced that the pension system is not working so well. Just like we have it here, the Social Security is underfunded, right? And well, their Social Security is underfunded by like $500 million, and they can't just turn around and get $500,000 anywhere. And their overall revenues are down by like 30% or something. I don't know exactly. But anyway, the CFO would have come in there and told them, listen, we are in dire straits here. This is financially not going well, and we need somebody to turn that around. A lot of this will have to do with philanthropy, because you can't just increase revenues they're not producing anything in there. So a good portion of this will have to be philanthropy. And I think that philanthropy, if you travel around the world, I was very privileged to do business in a lot of countries around the world. And I tell you, my experience is that philanthropy only really exists in one country, and that's the United States. But if there's a healthy philanthropic culture that doesn't exist in 90% of the other countries. And there's many different reasons, but the bottom line is these cardinals knew that something needs to change, both in organization, accountability, and fundraising. And the Pope, like in any organization, this is sort of the reality of it, where grace will build on that. But the reality of it is they need somebody who knows how to help with this and put systems in place and ask people to help. And I think, the majority of people in that room probably knew that Americans are generous people, and that an American could go a long way in fixing some of the issues that the Vatican State has. I think the Vatican State has many more problems than the Catholic Church has. I distinguish the two things. A lot of the negative news you're getting is actually the Vatican State, and less so the Curia is the Church. So anyway.
Have you seen the movie Conclave?
No.
No.
I'm not going to, because
you're not going to?
No, it's just I get all angry about it, or frustrated, let's say, about it. It's a total fiction. It's like reading Dan Brown, right, with the albino Swiss Guard or something. I didn't watch that either. So
okay.
Because it's like and my wife would hate this, because we're going to sit there and I'm going to complain about every turn of, and that gets even old for me to hear. So you know what? They're not saying it's true, so why am I going to be concerned? It's the same with this movie they did about Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, and it's like, come on, nobody says that that's the truth, so why would I get all bent out of shape that I can see that it isn't? And besides, who's asking me? So I'm just not doing it.
There you go. So one thing that is true is you had beer with the Pope. What is beer with the Pope like?
Fun. So the Pope would come on a regular basis to visit us. There's 135 people who protect him in the Swiss Guards. Often it would be in the summer residence where he would go, but also he would also come to our barracks. And it's very simple. He would usually, so with Pope John Paul II, it would always be official in a sense that he's not going to come unannounced. He says, hey, when you have this feast or so, I will come and be with you. We may have a feast of our patron or something like that. And then he would say, I'll come and have a meal with you, or come and come for coffee afterwards. And he would come in usually with Monsignor Civic, and just sit down and then go around and say, hey, so what are you all doing? Or one day he asked, hey, I only see you in this way, like in my interaction. Why don't you guys, we get together and have a couple of beers and you show me and tell me what else that you're doing, also in your free time. And so we put on a slideshow for him to say, look, this is what's happening, what all the other things are doing. And he would ask, and then he would ask questions, and he would be open for us to ask him questions. So a very, in a way, low-key environment. That's why I know that where he likes jokes and that he's very easygoing, because it would just, I mean, you're so used to him there anyway, in a sense, but very low pressure. He liked beer, and he had a big sweet tooth, John Paul. Now Benedict so I knew Benedict very well as a cardinal, but I have two nephews who went into the Swiss Guards also. The Swiss Guards is often a family thing where you keep doing this. And Benedict loved the Swiss Guards when I was there, and he would always join the Swiss Guards for their big events. But as a cardinal, you can just show up and it's not a big deal. But then once he was Pope, Benedict was so, again, this other directedness, that he knew that if he would tell the guards, hey, I want to join you for your barbecue, then it will become his barbecue, not ours, right? Because then everybody shows up. And so what Benedict always did is he would have his brother, Georg. He had a brother who was also a priest, and he would send his brothers to the guards and say, hey, guards, are you having a barbecue on Saturday or on Sunday? Because on Sundays, when they don't cook for us, so then we do a barbecue, and we just have beer and bratwurst, and he's Bavarian. We eat the same stuff. And then Georg would come and say, hey, do you guys have the barbecue on Sunday? And the guards would say, yes, we do. And he says, can I join you? And they'd say, yeah, of course you can. Georg is always invited. And he says, can I bring a friend? And then, yeah, of course you can bring a friend. And so then they say, okay, 2 people, me and my friend. Sunday comes, his friend is the Pope. And he comes in and he sits down, and they sit on a table and they have their mass and their bratwurst with bread or whatever. And the reason why Benedict did this is because really only he just wanted a beer and the bratwurst and hang out with us, with the guards on Sunday, but he didn't want to destroy this is their leisure time. And he's like, if I show up as the Pope, then 5 other priests and the cardinal and everybody comes along, and then this is not about the guards anymore and just about a Sunday out. And so I always find that very endearing, and it gives you, Pope Benedict is somebody that people don't really know the way I know him, because he's sort of, this is the rough, the austere Panzer Cardinal and everything. And that's not true at all. Like how we met him and how we know him, he's the most gentle, most beautiful human being that you've ever met. And this is an example of how much he thinks about the other person.
One of the questions is, when people were meeting with the Pope in private, were you there as a guard, or did you step out?
So when people plural, then we would be there. People individual or a president or something, no, then we're outside.
Okay.
But when he has a group, then we are right next, just in case something happens. But these state visits and stuff, like I was there when Ronald Reagan came to visit John Paul II, and I was outside. I was actually an honor guard then, and was actually wearing the uniform, and I wasn't responsible for the sort of civil cloth security, but we were all outside the room, and they went into a room themselves to speak. And so that they wouldn't be, there may be a translator with them or something, but I think between the two of them, there was nobody in the room.
Yeah. Leslie asked the question, you said that serving the Pope changed your life. How did you get from papal guard to tech founder?
Well, so I found my faith in there through him, and specifically, just as a side note, through prayer, like to actually recognize through my experience, the feeling, the presence of God. And so then I focused very much on that, and honestly thought that's I would want to become a priest or go into a monastery. Actually, I looked at the Augustinians, which Pope Leo is an Augustinian. So that's how I thought of that. But then during my discernment, and actually John Paul was funny to say, well, I'm saying, well, God exists, therefore I'm gonna, and he would say, like, yeah, okay, now you find God. Now the first thing you do is tell him what to do. Is that it? Like, I'm like, no. This is okay. Just enjoy God. God means well. Just enjoy and see what God has in store for you. Just like piano. And I soon after, in February 5th, as a matter of fact, 1988, I met a girl. Her name is Michelle, and she's American. And I didn't speak a word of English. We spoke in Italian and French together. And when I met her, I knew that that was going to be my wife. And I introduced her to John Paul, and he liked her. So I decided to leave, and she was American. She lived in Chicago, and I thought, you know how they always joke about Americans not knowing geography? It goes both ways. So I moved to Boston because I found a school, the Augustinian school, that would accept me without speaking English to give me a chance to study there, thinking I would just drive on the weekend to Chicago to see my girlfriend. Yep. Just saying, it goes around.
Exactly, yeah.
And so that's how I ended up in Boston, because of the Augustinians. They let me into Merrimack College.
Yep.
And with me not speaking a lick of English. And they said, look, sink or swim. I lived with them, with the Augustinians, and they said, if you can swim in one semester, meaning you learn English and you pass your courses, you can stay. And I did. And then we got married a year later. And then through Merrimack is when I found FTP software, because there was another kid from Merrimack who said, hey, you speak some languages, and I know these kids from MIT, and they started this company, and they would like somebody to talk to the foreign, they're bothered by the foreign customers. I'm like, and they said, oh, and they can't pay because they're a startup. I'm like, well, I'm not allowed to work anyway, so I'll take the job. And so we were in, where was it? South, like you go Andover and then through North Andover, Reading, and then the next town there was our office. And we just grew, and I started as a non-paid intern, and then they started to pay for my school, and then they started to give me shares, and before I graduated, I ran all of international and grew it. And then when I graduated in '93, I moved. We started an international subsidiary, and I led that, and I moved to Germany, to Munich, to run everything outside of the United States.
Ah, that's great. That's absolutely
Wakefield.
Great.
That's right.
It's Wakefield.
Rod is right. Wakefield is where we were.
Yeah. Okay.
And then eventually, this was so successful. We went public in '93 as well, but then it became very much, the suit showed up, and it wasn't. We called FTP Fund That Pays, because we were all friends, and it was the work, the meaning of the whole thing, and it was just an amazing group of people. And once the analysts and all this stuff, I'm like, I'm not dealing. I left in '95, and I joined Dragon Systems, moved back to Boston, and I met Jim and Janet Baker, the founders of Dragon. And they invented speech recognition, and that was another rocket ship. I have to say, I was very blessed in my career. Dragon was again an amazing experience to be a part of, and I think that's when we met, Diane. Was I still at Dragon? Maybe, yeah.
Maybe
until 2000, and then I did a few others afterwards. Yeah, but all this is always. I went back to my. I saw this system of the American dream, and look, I lived the American dream, but I also saw how things can go wrong. We sold Dragon Systems, and and we sold it to somebody who was corrupt, and so we sold the company for $600 million, and poof, the whole thing just went away because somebody lied. And so I started to ask myself, does this system, like, is this an immoral system? So can in a sense, can I be a Christian and a capitalist at the same time? And so I went on a quest to find out the answer. And that book that Diane was talking about, they're called the Pope and the CEO is my answer of researching that. So I ended up going back to school, and I ended up on the business side. I joined Monitor Group and ran one of their subsidiaries to basically learn better business, because I figured, well, maybe I don't know business so well. But on the other hand, I also studied ministry theology to find out if I can be a Christian capitalist in a sense.
Yeah.
So that book is kind of my answer to that.
Yeah. PJ Putnam has asked the question: do the Swiss guards train with the halberds? Or the halberds
Yeah,
just largely
not to fight. Yeah, not to fight. But the halberd is, but our military exercises and stuff, and the marching and everything is done with the halberd. And so I was the halberd. You train with the halberd so long until it's like an extension of your arm. Like I can still today, I've tried it. I can still throw it in the air and catch it exactly at the right place, because it's like driving a bicycle. But like that, you just have to do it a lot. But it's not that's for representative purposes and for marching and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes left. This has been just an absolute treat. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I think it's been just absolutely a fabulous time. I'm getting some great thumbs up. Any other questions? Any other questions from people? No? So I think of the Pope as a good networker.
Yeah.
I think you got, I mean, I think a skill that all of those cardinals and those people have to have,
yeah.
Is the ability, and you're talking about the philanthropy and the fundraising. That's going to be, the name of the book is The Pope and the CEO.
Yeah.
I think.
And then if I can just put a plug in. So I now teach entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America. I moved from my beloved Boston because they offered that I could help build a business school from scratch. And that's just too good of an offer, because I have so many complaints about how education is going wrong. So when I got this chance, I'm like, I'm in. And so I've been living here for 10 years with my family, and I run the Entrepreneurship Center in the Bush School of Business, which I helped found and define, of saying, how does this, for example, every freshman I teach the freshman class and the last class, and every freshman at our school starts a business. Like, business seems to be the only thing you can get a certificate for without ever doing it.
It's true.
That's stupid. Okay, it's not going to happen on my watch. Not happening.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I worked for the During the pandemic, I worked for the Small Business Administration, and the people who kept calling saying, "I need help with my business," and I'm like, "This isn't a business. This is this is a crapshoot."
Yeah, exactly. And so I'd like you to be aware of what we do here, and specifically, if you're interested in doing that in other places, I wrote my second book is called The Art of Principled Entrepreneurship, and in it I both say how I teach, but I also talk about the redemptive side of the market economy, because I do think you can be a Christian capitalist, or let's say even a moral capitalist, to say capitalism can be a force for good, but it needs a mental model behind it. And I'm defining that mental model in it. You don't have to be a Christian or a Catholic or even a strong believer to understand or to agree with what I'm saying in it. It's not written in that way. But you have to agree with the fact that the American dream and the American economy and prosperity is built on us trusting each other. Like, if we need a lawyer to do all this, it's too late. Like, the transaction cost is too high. A handshake has to be a handshake. We have to be able to trust each other's words, and this ti voglio bene, that we actually want the good of each other. If we do that, then prosperity is what is naturally falling out of that, which is, in my opinion, what America is all about. I love this country, what it's done for me, what it's done for the world, and I believe that that this is not something that has gone away. I think I'm teaching, and I hope as many students as I can, to take to reintegrate and to re-believe in the American dream, and that in that sense the best days are something that is always just coming. It's never behind you. And yeah, I'd love it if you would check out my book, and And also on LinkedIn, if you want to be in touch. A friend of Diane's is a friend of mine.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Absolutely so much. Joanne, thank you so much for putting the link in there for Andreas' book. I appreciate you looking that up for us.
Thanks,
That's really
Joanne.
wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Joanne. Elaine said she met you at the professional Catholic group at Copley.
Ha, nice.
That's where she,
Man, that's a couple of years ago.
just a
I
few
didn't
years
have gray
ago.
hair then.
So, Andreas, thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really interesting, and everything from I remembered you as tall. I don't think I remember you as 6'9", but that is definitely tall. It's
They
definitely
like
tall.
the guards to be tall. It's like literally the 800-pound gorilla, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you do think about the fact that it is so important that it is a physical presence in some
Yeah,
cases. That makes that a very different
yeah,
experience.
helps.
Well, thank you everybody for joining me. Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
Andreas. Blessings to everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.